The following is a CPAC special presentation. Cette émission est une présentation spéciale de CPAC.
Hello, I'm Peter Van Dusen. In a matter of days, voters in Canada's most populous province will choose a new government, and it appears the winds of change are blowing strong in Ontario. The polls suggest that Liberal leader Kathleen Wynne is about to see the 15-year rule of her party come to an end. But will the voters opt for a progressive Conservative government led by Doug Ford or an NDP government led by Andrea Horwath? The polls suggest it might be too close to call. Over the next 30 minutes, CPAC's Sean Mallon hits the campaign trail to help us understand the issues and the options for the people of Ontario when they go to the polls June 7th.
You've told me what's needed in order for your communities to thrive. That is, that's what government's for.
Hi, Karen. How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for coming to my house.
Government is about working with communities to make sure that they have the opportunity to thrive so that the families in those communities can have great lives.
Our leader, Ontario's next premier, Doug Ford.
On June the 7th, when we send the Liberals packing and our all-star candidates are here and they form government, a new day will dawn, a day of prosperity, a day of growth, and a day of opportunity this province has never seen before. We will be putting money back into your pockets, and we will bring accountability, transparency, and integrity back to the taxpayers of this great province.
It doesn't have to be this way. They don't have to keep going back to the choices they've made in the past where the problems don't get solved and everyday families end up no better off. We can make the kind of change that brings hope back to Ontarians and hope back to young people.
Provincial leaders waste no time storming the campaign trail. But
the Ontario election campaign officially started in early May.
On your mark, get set, go.
But the prelude was an extraordinary political drama that exploded at Queen's Park back in the winter.
A couple hours ago, I learned about troubling allegations about my conduct and character, and I'm here tonight to address them.
Patrick Brown was forced out as Tory leader amid allegations of sexual misconduct. Allegations he denies.
The events that were alleged by anonymous accusers could not have happened.
But the allegations still stand, Patrick. The allegations still stand.
With Brown now out, the PC's called a snap leadership race.
It's now our pleasure to introduce our 4 leadership candidates.
The campaign culminated in a shambolic convention with a disputed vote count.
We expect this review to be resolved in the short term.
Finally, hours later than planned and after all the delegates were sent home, the new Ontario Conservative leader was announced.
Doug Ford! Tonight is a clear sign that there are a lot of work ahead of us.
And with that, everything changed. The PC platform with Brown's picture on the cover was jettisoned. The Tory team, with mere weeks to prepare for the campaign, started rolling out big-ticket promises. $5 billion for Toronto subways, cuts to income taxes and small business taxes, and 10 cents off gasoline taxes, all while promising billions of savings through what Ford called efficiencies.
The Ontario's PC party are the only ones standing between you and the $2 a litre for gas. We're the only party with a plan to bring gas prices down. We're going to eliminate the Liberal NDP cap and trade, stop the Liberal NDP carbon tax, and reduce Ontario's excise tax. By doing so, the PC government will reduce gas prices by 10 cents a litre.
I want to ask you this. The other Conservative leaders, Mr. Hudak, Mr. Harris, they were very upfront about what their cuts were going to look like. Very upfront. They were honest about it. And I want to know, why don't you have the guts to tell people what your cuts are going to look like? What is in store for the people of Ontario? You have to come clean.
Let me answer that, Andrea. I'll answer that, Andrea. Unlike both of you, I've actually helped run a government.
Doug Ford has said that he is going to give tax breaks to the richest corporations and the richest people in the province, and that is going to require cuts to education and healthcare, because you can't take $6 to $12 billion out of the services that that people depend on without hurting people's schools, people's hospitals, the services that they rely on.
Conservatives have a pretty good record of getting their hands around the finances.
The Tories touted the backgrounds of star candidates like Rod Phillips to try to reassure the voters.
My own background, as you know, is in business. I've run my own business. I've run larger businesses. So I think applying some of those principles will help, making sure that we have money for the programs that matter: healthcare, education, transportation.
This is our line 6 over here.
Phillips is a longtime backroom Tory and a prominent businessman. He's taking on a veteran Liberal MPP, Joe Dickson, in the newly created Ajax riding.
Not much of a record in Canadian politics, federal, provincially, with bringing down large deficits without cutting. Cuts is not a word that Mr. Ford has said, but surely there would have to be some tough decisions made. And the big targets, of course, are healthcare and education.
Well, the things that he said and that we've been saying is that healthcare and education won't see reductions, because that's not what people want. You hear people talking about needing more nurses, not less nurses. They need teachers with more time in the class, not less time in the class. But efficiencies are absolutely something that we all have to live with.
80% of the people that we interviewed, from the very beginning of the campaign to this part of the campaign, have said that they believe that we need to have a change in government. That makes a change election.
Why do they want to change election?
Well, they're looking at the incumbent Liberal Party, not happy with the record, haven't heard anything from them over the space of the last 6 months. It's really inspired them to think that they should get another term, and are really dissatisfied with the Premier, so it's time for someone else.
The Liberals claim a compelling case for re-election, and here's some of the evidence. This is from the most recent budget. Look at this chart. Economic growth, Ontario compared to the G7, outpacing all other countries. And the next chart down is job growth. Since the depths of the recession to March 2017, almost 700,000 jobs created. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Ontario that we've seen in decades. And then there's the Liberal Party platform. Here's their page. It's just full of socially progressive initiatives such as better childcare and improved minimum wage. But what's been the result for the polls? Well, look at this chart that was produced by the Toronto Star, and look at the red line. The Liberals steadily downward since the beginning of the campaign into a distant third. The orange line, the NDP rising into a near tie with the Tories, as progressives seemingly surging to the New Democrats, hoping to head off a Ford victory. And then there was an embarrassing story out of Windsor, all related to this man. Reno Bartolin is a Windsor area candidate. He was offered a chance to have the Premier campaign with him, but he declined. I wonder if in your private moments, whether you're wondering if it might be your personal brand that has the Liberals currently in third place.
Well, that's for you and all the pundits to determine. You know, Reno is a great candidate. I was with him when I was there just recently in Windsor at the Windsor Town Hall, and you know, we have a great team of candidates. They believe in what we are doing. That's why they signed up to run.
I like the shirt.
Oh, thanks.
Looking good. How's it going?
Lawyer Jess Spindler is one of those candidates. She's attempting to hold what has been one of the safest Liberal seats, St. Paul's in Midtown Toronto.
The storyline for the Liberal team has not been that encouraging. What's it like being a first-time candidate in the face of that kind of news?
I mean, people will decide on election day what kind of change they'd like to see. I think there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with the extreme change that Doug Ford has on offer. I think as a new candidate, one of the things I would like to present is that I can be a new voice at Queen's Park. I can bring a fresh perspective. I can represent a new demographic, and then I'm here for the community.
Over on the Tory campaign, while Ford kept smiling for the cameras, there were stumbles. A Brampton candidate quit amid allegations of a massive data breach of information related to the 407 toll highway. There were ongoing stories of irregularities at nomination meetings. And then this.
It doesn't cost anything, we're just signing people up today. That's it, I'm going to introduce you.
The Liberals released an audio recording that appeared to show Ford offering to buy PC memberships on behalf of an Etobicoke candidate in 2016.
Have you ever paid for anybody else's memberships, and were you aware that that could potentially violate campaign spending?
No. Again, this goes back almost 2 years ago. It went through an appeals process. The claims were dismissed. My friends, this is the Liberals trying to change the channel 2 weeks before the election.
I mean, it's a stinking mess, to be honest with you, and somebody needs to take a hold of it and be responsible for it, and Mr. Ford is the leader of that party.
Andrea Horwath and the NDP had rough moments of their own. There was a $1.4 billion budgeting error in the NDP platform. Social media posts surfaced from one candidate criticizing Remembrance Day poppies. Another one posted a Hitler meme, which the candidate claimed to know nothing about. And both the Liberals and Tories pounced on a New Democrat promise to close the Pickering nuclear plant this summer, rather than the planned 2024.
Those are some good paying jobs out in Durham region that might disappear if you shut it early.
I understand that, and I understand it is something that is contentious, but it's something that, you know, we have to make sure that we have all stakeholders combined together. We're having that kind of robust conversation and ultimately do what's best for the community. And that's what, you know, the NDP is putting forward, and that's something that's, you know, that's a decision. These often sometimes tough decisions that need to be made.
Who's gonna win? Team Singh! Who's gonna win? Team Singh!
Guratan Singh is the younger brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and he's running in a community where his brother ran and won, Brampton.
You know, the NDP still has a reputation of being a bit impractical, necessarily spendthrift. There was that $1.4 billion oops, though, right? Is that a bit hard to explain away? I mean, it kind of plays into your opponent's narrative.
Yeah, well, when you look at it, it was something that Andrea Horwath showed immense leadership on. She immediately corrected it. It's something about 1% of the total budget that's being proposed, and
serious money, though.
It is, and we don't doubt that. But it's something that Andrea showed leadership.
A few days later, Singh became a source of campaign troubles himself when this 12-year-old picture surfaced.
Andrea, what do you have to say to the report that Guratan Singh, one of your star candidates, held a sign with an expletive, the police?
Yeah, you know, first of all, that's an abhorrent sign. That's a sign that's despicable. I believe that it's a despicable sentiment, and Guratan actually has said so as well. He's very regretful that he held that sign a number of years ago. But look, Guratan has changed his life around since his early 20s when he was holding that sign.
Each of the campaigns has had its own problems, yes?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the Tories are running the shakiest winning campaign I've ever seen, and I've covered a bunch of federal campaigns as well. So of the dozen or so federal and provincial that I've covered, it's the shakiest winning campaign that I've ever seen, presuming they win. The NDP's had probably the strongest campaign, except that their math doesn't add up. And they've had some problems with their platform, you know, and admitting to a $700 million hole in it because you forgot to check something you forgot to count something as an expense rather than a surplus is a problem.
And the Liberals are just feeling, I guess, voter fatigue more than anything else.
The fifth election in a row is the hardest to win, Sean, and I think for the Liberals, they are seeming like they're out of gas, not because of anything necessarily that's happened on in their recent watch, but I think there's an accumulation of thirst for change, and that's what it feels like. I mean, I don't see a path to victory for the Liberals right now, but you know, anything can happen.
There is a fourth party running candidates in all 124 ridings, and they have an entirely different kind of problem. They've never elected anybody in Ontario.
So for the Green Party, the endless problem in Ontario has been, how do you get heard above the noise, be taken seriously? What are you doing this time to do that?
Well, first of all, we have a great media team that's helping us get our message out. But I think also we just have a bold, visionary platform.
Shut out of the leaders' debates, Green leader Mike Schreiner jumps at any opportunity for airtime.
Well, one of the things I'm very concerned about is one of the biggest crises we're facing right now is the climate crisis. I mean, extreme weather events last year alone cost Canada $4.9 billion just in insurable losses, not to mention the other losses we've experienced. And so the fact that none of the three establishment parties are even talking about it, the Conservatives seem to just to deny that it's even a problem, and the NDP seems to be ignoring it. And so, yes, we need to have a conversation about that, because I will not let my children have a future where ice storms and droughts and hurricanes and floods and other extreme weather events are the new normal. So we're going to fight to make sure climate change is talked about in this election, and that Ontario has a plan to be carbon neutral by 2050.
But governing is more about than just the environment in this province.
Absolutely.
Top issue, most people would say, is healthcare, followed by education, hydro prices. Give me an idea, for example, on healthcare. How would you deal with things like wait times and crowded hospital rooms?
Well, the Green Party thinks it's absolutely critical to transform our healthcare system to make it more about preventing illness instead of just treating sickness. That's the only way we're going to start addressing things like the crisis of wait times and hallway medicine in hospitals. So I have talked to so many doctors and nurses and other frontline healthcare professionals who have said, you know, one of the biggest challenges we face is that almost half the people who go to an emergency room would not have to be there if they could access good primary health care. So when we talk about transforming our healthcare system, it's making primary health care the foundation of our healthcare system, making sure everyone can access an integrated health team, whether that's a family doctors or nurse practitioner-led clinics, community healthcare centers, etc. Secondly, we need to address the mental health and addictions crisis in Ontario. That's why we're proposing a historic $4.1 billion investment over the next 4 years. We would like to see mental health care be part of OHIP.
So you have yet to elect a member in this province. You're very open about it. That's your top priority. You're the one they want to get elected in Guelph. You came third last time.
Yeah.
Logically speaking, practically speaking, is that what you need to do?
Well, our goal in this election is to elect our first Green MPP. We want to follow in the footsteps of British Columbia, where they elected one MPP and now have tripled their caucus and have 3 Green MLAs holding the balance of responsibility in minority government. The PEI Greens started with 1, now they've doubled their caucus and are polling second in the province and looking at forming at least official opposition, if not even government, after the next election. So we know how important it is to win that first seat. We're very confident that we will win in Guelph, primarily because I've been such a champion for Guelph on so many issues.
I don't think I could feel more passionate about this.
As the campaign progressed, the leaders stepped up their attacks on the other party platforms.
We're dealing with a Liberal Party that's got a plan, that's funded, that has done the hard work to put those plans in place and work with the other levels of government to make sure that they are reasonable, they're practical, they can be implemented. And we've got an NDP whose plan is so riddled with errors and questions about what they actually mean and what they're actually willing to fund that it's not worth the paper that it's written on. And the Tories, I don't think they've put pen to paper.
In her third campaign as Ontario NDP leader, Andrea Horwath was promising free childcare for lower income earners, to buy back the portion of Hydro One that was privatized, and to increase taxes on more affluent Ontarians. And at this event, she took a swing at her opponent's record on health care.
We will also be increasing the nursing and frontline staff across the system. And so the Liberals, as we were saying at the beginning, decided to lay off about 1,600 nurses. We're going to hire 4,500 nurses.
Should you form government, how do you accommodate all the kind of promises you're talking about today while keeping healthcare costs from spiraling out of control? And I think in particular, would you take a hard line on fee negotiations with doctors?
Well, you know, a couple of things. I think first and foremost, the frustration that doctors have had stems from the squeezing of the healthcare system. I mean, as the Liberals continue to cut back on hospital funding and squeeze home care and squeeze long-term care, it's the professionals in the system that become more and more frustrated. So with our commitments around hospital funding, around long-term care expansion, around investments in home care, all of these things are going to relieve the pressure that we have in our healthcare system. And yes, it's going to cost money. That's why we're going to ask richer people, richer residents, richer Ontarians, and more profitable corporations to pay a little bit more. Does that mean it's going to put us in a financial situation that's going to mean some deficits? We've acknowledged that. We're going to be in a deficit position as we try to fix what Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals broke in our healthcare system.
In Pickering, Doug Ford's target was the swiftly rising NDP.
While Andrea Horwath pretends to care about the middle class, she's promising to shut down the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station this year, all to satisfy another radical special interest group, another radical promise that will cost Ontario families. Andrea Horwath is promising to fire not hundreds, but thousands of people. More than 7,500 jobs in Ontario depends on this plant.
We wanted a chance to talk face-to-face with each leader. Ford's team declined a one-on-one interview with CPAC. Wynne's advisors said her schedule was too busy.
It's an important election, right? There's a big important change.
But Horwath agreed to talk to us after this event in an Etobicoke donut shop in Ford's own riding. An event marked by a bizarre disruption from a sitting Liberal MPP who's also running here.
I think we both share a common
I'm sorry, Shafiq. Shafiq, if you don't mind, I'm going to finish my press conference, and then you can have all the time you want to talk to the media. But please don't interrupt me. It's very rude. Very rude.
Is it the right time to be increasing corporate taxes when they're cutting taxes south of the border? Doesn't that hurt competitiveness?
We believe that our tax rates are going to be competitive, but not only that, we know that business cares about things like an educated workforce. Amazon, for example, when they came to look for potential locations in Canada, they looked to Toronto particularly because of the lifestyle opportunity.
NDP is often accused of having ideology trump practicality. For example, buying back the privatized portion of Hydro One. Is that really practical? It seems a bit like putting the toothpaste back in the tube.
Well, on the contrary, Ontarians telling me every day that they are so upset with Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals for selling off Hydro One.
But it's gone.
In fact, it was Mr. Ford that started with the privatization of our electricity system, and Ms. Wynne has simply made it worse. What people are telling me is not only do they want a better life for themselves now, but they want to set things up for the next generation to do well also, and they know that Hydro One into public hands is something that's going to help us do that.
Over in the Tory camp, they are painfully aware that blunders in past campaigns cost the PCs dearly. Now there were questions about whether it was happening again.
You've started this campaign with a pretty substantial lead. The lead appears to be gone now. What does that say about your campaign tactics and your personal performance? Are you happy with both?
Well, you know, I never paid attention to polls. I've said that from day one. The only poll that counts is on election day.
So you've run a great campaign, is that your answer?
We've run an extremely good campaign. We're getting incredible responses across Ontario. We're getting record crowds. People are excited. People want change. They want relief. They want relief from being gouged by the government.
Do you think it's time for you to do some kind of a reset to kind of capture the magic that you had, a month ago?
You know something? We're running a strong campaign. Again, we're crisscrossing Ontario. We're getting a phenomenal response. I'm getting a phenomenal response here. People want change. They want the government that's going to start putting money back in their pocket, reducing their taxes, lowering their hydro rates, lowering gas prices. They need relief.
I would suggest you're losing or
what many people like about you the most, the fact that you're an anti-politician, yet you're so on script now. Do you think that is hurting you?
Well, I'm always anti-politician, Cynthia. I've never changed.
Relations with the media have not been the best. As we speak now, they've declined to do an interview with CPAC. He's doing short scrums. Give me a sense of what relations have been like in terms of getting answers from the candidate.
Getting answers to the candidate are not easy. The campaign folks themselves are professionals, and they're good to deal with. The candidate himself is not as accessible as perhaps I would have thought he would be, being that he used to be more accessible when he was a municipal politician. Mr. Ford always prided himself, frankly, on his accessibility to the media, but I don't think that he's calling the shots on that. I think that the folks around him they're playing like they have a sort of a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter, and they don't want to throw the ball, so they're doing a lot of handoffs and hoping that they can run out the clock that way.
It seems a little bit like Stephen Harper events that we used to cover, fenced off back.
Very few
limited
questions, and they do this thing with the clapping, which is odd, I will say.
The clapping?
Yeah, the clapping of the, when to stop questions, they all start clapping.
Thank you. Thank you.
And sometimes it's like there are only a few people there, so it almost sounds like the slow clap at a comedy club. But they do what they have to do, and it's their strategy. They're sticking to it, and if they win, they're going to look like geniuses. And if they somehow lose, then a lot of people will look at the strategy and say, "Wow, you really blew this one."
It's very interesting when you take a look at why Conservatives are voting the way that they are. Leadership is not a big part of their reasoning. It's really related to this idea of getting the deficit under control, getting taxes under control, getting hydro rates under control, changing the government, changing the direction of the government. Where Doug Ford is a motivator is for his opponents. So the primary reason that people who are voting for the NDP right now are voting for the NDP is they don't want to bring in somebody like Doug Ford who could wreck progress in the province. There's a progressive coalition in the province, and then there's a conservative coalition in the province. The conservative coalition's got one party to pick from. The progressive coalition has two parties to pick from. The progressive coalition is about 60% of the voters. The conservative coalition is probably maybe 40-45% of the voters. Doug Ford's got those people. All of the action is on the other side, where progressives are deciding who is going to be their party of choice in this election campaign. And what's been happening since the start of the campaign is they've been sliding gradually and increasingly towards the NDP.
In the final leaders' debate, Wynne unveiled a surprising tactic to try to change the channel.
So here's what I want to say about the last 5 years. Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better.
It was a feisty, heated 90 minutes.
You don't have to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 because we know the government shuts down after 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh.
If you work night times, you work afternoons,
Have you ever been to a
Peter,
daycare?
You will be able to.
Apparently not. 4:30.
I'm planning to go down to Queen's Park.
Why would you put public sector unions first and the people of this province second?
Well, I want to say how disappointing I am to hear this from you. I expected a question like that from Mr. Ford, quite frankly, Ms. Wynne. But nonetheless, what I believe is that we have to prevent those kinds of labor disputes from happening in the first place.
That's the difference between you and me. I'm looking for the fairest, most practical solution, and you're looking for the purest ideological solution.
I'm looking for the highest quality for our kids.
To make sure we do the best.
Let's let Mr. Ford.
Businesses, Bob, are terrified. I can't stress that enough. They're terrified,
How do you trust
and they will
somebody
be
without a
leaving.
platform?
Who do you
by
trust
the
with your
droves.
children, Doug? Who do you trust with your parents, Doug?
You lost 125,000 jobs, and you lost 300,000 jobs.
We're just getting rolling, and now we're out of time.
Thank you to our audience here. Thank you to our audience at home. And remember, advance polls are already open.
And vote June 7th.
That's right. Take
June
the time.
7th.
Get out and vote.